On Christmas, my sister declared, "You're a growing embarrassment to our family." Cousin Sarah nodded, adding, "Someone had to say it." I calmly answered, "I understand." Then Dad's coworker called, "Is your daughter truly Forbes' youngest billionaire?" All laughter ceased instantly. The biting words landed not as sound, but as a physical blow, a sharp, invisible force that knocked the air from my lungs right there at Christmas dinner. My own sister, Olivia, her voice cutting through the festive hum like a knife, declared me an embarrassment to the family, and the carefully constructed facade of warmth in that room shattered. The crystal chandelier in Mom's dining room, usually a source of soft, inviting light, now cast harsh, unforgiving shadows across the polished mahogany table, reflecting the cold judgment in the eyes of the 23 faces crammed into a space barely meant for 12. Their voices, a deafening symphony of thinly veiled concern, swirled around me, each note a fresh sting. Olivia and her husband, Ethan, sat at the head of the table, radiating that smug superiority that comes from meticulously checking every single societal box. I had driven 6 hours from Denver, my beat-up Honda Civic looking painfully, almost comically, out of place next to the German luxury cars glittering in the circular driveway. At 28, I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale whispered about at cocktail parties and then swiftly moved on from. While Olivia meticulously climbed the corporate law ladder, I had, 3 years prior, done the unthinkable. I dropped out of my Stanford MBA to chase what everyone, including most of the people at this table, called that ridiculous tech thing. "Emily is still working on her little project," Mom announced, passing the potatoes with a dismissive gesture that spoke volumes. It felt like she was talking about finger painting, not the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into building a company. My cousin Chloe leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet glinting, a stark contrast to my own simple watch. "How's that going? Are you making any money yet?" The emphasis on "yet" was a subtle barb, making it clear she already knew my answer. I just stabbed at my green beans, the dull ache in my chest tightening. "It's progressing." My voice felt thin, like a wire about to snap. "Progressing?" Uncle George repeated, exchanging a knowing look with his wife, Susan. That's one way to describe unemployment. A hot flush crept up my neck, but I kept my gaze fixed on my plate. Dad cleared his throat from the other end of the table. David Monroe, a man who had built a successful accounting firm over 30 years, saw my perceived failure as a constant prick to his carefully cultivated pride. "Emily's exploring her options. Isn't that right, honey?" His condescension stung worse than any outright criticism, a patronizing kindness that made my jaw clench. Olivia set down her wine glass with deliberate precision, the clink echoing in the sudden lull. "We're all worried about you, Em. You're almost 30. Most people your age have established careers, retirement accounts, mortgage payments. What do you have?" I met her gaze across the table, my eyes burning. My older sister had always been the golden child, perfect grades, perfect husband, perfect two-story colonial. She'd followed the blueprint exactly and couldn't fathom why anyone would dare deviate. "I have a vision," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "A vision doesn't pay bills," Ethan interjected, "of course. He worked in finance, naturally. I could get you an entry-level interview at my firm. It's something, better than whatever you're doing now." Aunt Susan, ever the well-meaning busybody, chimed in, "My neighbor's daughter works at Walmart. They have excellent benefits." I could put in a word. The suggestions came rapid-fire after that. Panera was hiring. The grocery store needed night managers. Had I considered going back to school? Maybe teaching, something stable, something normal, something that wouldn't embarrass them at their country club. I pushed food around my plate, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, letting their words wash over me. 3 years of 16-hour days, maxed-out credit cards, and ramen dinners had led to this moment. They had no idea what I'd built in my cramped Denver apartment, the algorithms I'd painstakingly developed, the partnerships I'd painstakingly secured, the quiet meetings with venture capitalists who actually understood what I was creating. Here's the thing about judgment, it often blinds people to the immense effort and unseen struggles behind someone's choices. This tendency, in psychology, is often referred to as the fundamental attribution error. We tend to attribute our own actions to situational factors, but attribute others' actions, especially those we disapprove of, to their internal character flaws, completely disregarding the complex context or their own hard-won rationale. "You're becoming an embarrassment to this family," Olivia announced again, and the last vestiges of polite chatter died. She looked around, gathering support like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "I'm sorry, but someone needs to say it. We can't keep making excuses for you." Cousin Chloe nodded vigorously. Finally, someone said it. "We're all thinking it." Mom's face went pale, but she didn't contradict Olivia. Dad studied his plate with intense focus, his silence a louder condemnation than any words. Uncle George cleared his throat in agreement. Aunt Susan looked sympathetic, but stayed silent. The weight of their collective disappointment pressed down on me like a physical thing, stealing my breath, making my chest ache. Every instinct screamed to defend myself, to tell them everything, to wipe that smug satisfaction off Olivia's face. But I'd learned patience over the past 3 years. I'd learned that timing mattered. "I understand," I said simply, the words a quiet promise to myself. What they didn't know was that my silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The conversation shifted after that, moving to Ethan's promotion, Chloe's upcoming trip to Hawaii, Uncle George's new boat. I became invisible again, which suited me just fine. I helped Mom clear dishes and listened to her gentle suggestion that maybe I should consider a more traditional path. I hugged everyone goodbye, promising to visit more often, knowing with absolute certainty I wouldn't. The drive back to Denver felt longer than usual. Snow started falling, making the highway treacherous, the flakes blurring into the darkness. My phone buzzed repeatedly in the cup holder, a frantic vibration I chose to ignore. Whatever fires needed putting out could wait until I was home. My apartment was freezing when I arrived near midnight, the heat having gone out again. I wrapped myself in blankets, shivering, and finally checked my messages. 47 texts, 23 missed calls, 14 urgent emails. And then, in the cold, quiet glow of my phone, the world I knew imploded. The Forbes article had dropped at 6 p.m. The headline glowed on my screen, a blazing beacon in the dim room. Forbes names Emily Monroe, 28, as youngest self-made billionaire in tech industry. Below it, a professionally shot photo of me, standing in front of my company's new headquarters in Boulder, a building that was still an empty shell in my mind, a placeholder for a dream. The article detailed how my data analytics platform had revolutionized healthcare management, how 3 Fortune 500 companies had bought enterprise licenses in the past 6 months, how the recent Series C funding had valued my company at $3.2 billion. My 60% stake, unusually high because I'd bootstrapped for 2 years and negotiated fiercely to maintain control, made me worth just over $2 billion on paper. I'd known the article was coming. Forbes had interviewed me 6 weeks ago, but I'd signed NDAs preventing discussion. The timing was pure coincidence, though I'd be lying if I didn't appreciate the irony. My phone rang, a jolt in the silent apartment. Daniel Hayes, my CFO, who had joined me in the early days for equity, sounded breathless. "Have you seen the traffic? Our website's getting hammered. We're getting thousands of requests for demos. CNBC wants you on tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow? Saturday?" I pointed out, a slight laugh escaping me. "They're doing a special segment. Bloomberg called too. And the Wall Street Journal. Emily, this is insane. We're trending #1 on Twitter." I asked him to handle the media requests and hung up, my hand shaking slightly. Sleep seemed impossible, so I made myself a cup of tea and watched the reactions roll in, my company's stock value, my personal worth, speculation about how I'd done it, and the inevitable criticism that I'd gotten lucky, that I'd had secret funding, that the valuation was inflated. The first family text came at 7 a.m. Saturday. Uncle George saw the Forbes article. Congratulations. We always knew you had it in you. Then Aunt Susan, so proud of you, sweetie. Remember when I suggested those other jobs? I was only trying to help. Cousin Chloe, OMG, can't believe you didn't tell us. We're family. The messages poured in. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered how close we'd been. People who'd suggested I work at Walmart now recalled always believing in my vision. The rewriting of history happened in real time, a dizzying, almost surreal performance. This immediate reinterpretation of past events is a classic example of hindsight bias, combined with elements of social desirability bias. People retroactively convince themselves they knew it all along, or that their past actions were always well-intentioned, not only to protect their self-image but also to align with the newly established success of the individual. It's a psychological defense mechanism to avoid the discomfort of being wrong or unsupportive. But not everyone was so quick to join the rewritten narrative, and that's when things truly got interesting. Olivia didn't text. Neither did Mom or Dad. I spent Saturday doing damage control. The CNBC interview went smoothly. I kept my responses measured, professional, focused on the company rather than personal details. When they asked about my background, I mentioned dropping out of business school, and the interviewer nearly gasped. You left Stanford's MBA program to build this in your apartment? It seemed like the right move at the time, I said simply, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. Sunday afternoon, Dad called. His voice sounded strained, a subtle tremor in his controlled tone. Emily, we need to talk about. What? I asked, my voice neutral, detached. He exhaled slowly. A colleague called me yesterday. William Harrison from the firm. He asked if my daughter was really the Forbes billionaire. I told him there must be some mistake. He paused, a heavy silence stretching between us. Then I Googled you. Emily, why didn't you tell us? He sounded genuinely confused, as though my silence was the strange part, not their judgment. Tell you what? I kept my voice perfectly flat. About your company, about the funding, about any of it. Would you have believed me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it felt like a shout. If I'd shown up at Thanksgiving last year and said I was building a billion-dollar company, what would you have said? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Your mother wants to talk, he said finally, a note of defeat in his voice. Mom's voice came on the line, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place, a mix of pride, relief, and something that bordered on panic. Sweetheart, we're so proud of you. We always have been. You know that, right? Do I? My voice was sharper than I intended. Of course, we worried because we love you. Parents worry. That's what we do. She was already reframing it, trying to spin their contempt into concern, their judgment into love, a story she was clearly telling herself as much as me. Is Olivia there? I asked. She's processing. You have to understand, this is a lot to take in. She's been working so hard at her firm, and now. Mom caught herself, a nervous cough escaping her. What I mean is, we're all adjusting to this news. Dad got back on the line. Several people from my firm have reached out. They're interested in your services. I told them I'd make introductions. There it was. The pivot from embarrassment to opportunity, from liability to asset. I was no longer the family failure. I was a networking opportunity, a status symbol, a name to drop. I'll have my business development team reach out, I said, my words clipped and devoid of warmth. Emily, about Christmas. Your sister was under a lot of stress. She didn't mean. She meant every word, I interrupted, my voice unwavering. And that's fine. I understand. Please don't be like this, Mom pleaded, her voice cracking. We're a family. I thought about that word. Family. The people who should have your back, who should believe in you even when the odds look impossible. The people who'd spent 3 years suggesting I apply to retail jobs. I need to go, I said, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. Media requests. And just when I thought I'd heard every possible variation of an apology, a new kind of audacity emerged. Monday brought another wave of calls. Olivia left a voicemail around noon. Her voice had lost its usual confidence, replaced by a forced casualness. It's me. Look, we should talk. I know things got heated at Christmas, but I was just trying to help. You know how I worry about you. Call me back, okay? We need to discuss some things. Ethan has some investment ideas he'd like to run by you. I deleted it, the audacity almost impressive. Tuesday morning, I met with my executive team at our Boulder headquarters. The building was glass and steel, state-of-the-art, a far cry from my apartment. My assistant brought coffee while Daniel walked through the explosion of interest. 17 new enterprise inquiries, he reported, including 2 of the biggest hospital networks in the country. Wells Fargo wants a meeting. JP Morgan is circling. Everyone wants a piece. Maya, my COO, looked up from her laptop, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. We also have 83 requests for interviews, including one from Oprah's people. Oprah? I sat down my coffee, a genuine surprise rippling through me. Apparently, you're inspiring, Maya said, her smirk widening. Young woman, no connections. Builds empire from nothing. It's a good story. It's not nothing, I corrected, a flicker of irritation. It's algorithms and analysis and 3 years of work. That doesn't sound as good in a headline, Daniel pointed out. He wasn't wrong. The media had latched onto the rags to riches narrative, conveniently ignoring my Stanford pedigree and upper-middle-class upbringing. I had advantages. I'd also had people who should have supported me call me an embarrassment. My phone buzzed. Another text from Olivia, please call me. This is important. Family shouldn't let business come between them. The sheer chutzpah of it was breathtaking. That evening, I attended a dinner with my board of directors at a restaurant in Low-High. The conversation flowed around venture capital, market projections, and expansion strategies. These people knew my worth before Forbes announced it. They'd seen the raw data, understood the algorithms, recognized the potential when it was still theoretical. You're handling the attention well, remarked Eleanor Vance, one of my earliest angel investors, a woman whose sharp eyes missed nothing. She'd written a check for $2 million when I had nothing but code and conviction. Some founders let success derail them. You seem remarkably grounded. I had good practice staying focused, I said, a dry chuckle escaping me. The past 3 years taught me to block out noise. Eleanor smiled knowingly. She'd been one of the few people who had met my family during the early fundraising days, witnessed my mother's barely concealed skepticism when I'd explained my business model over an awkward brunch. Family coming around now like moths to a flame. Let me guess, investment opportunities, business proposals, sudden emergencies requiring financial assistance. All of the above, I said, swirling my wine, plus several variations of, we always believed in you. The revision of history happens fast, Eleanor observed, a wry twist to her lips. People genuinely convinced themselves they were supportive all along. The human mind protects itself from uncomfortable truths. The dynamics Eleanor describes, family suddenly appearing with financial requests after success, highlights the importance of strong personal and financial boundaries. Without them, sudden wealth can attract a form of transactional relationship where family members feel entitled to a share, often fueled by unconscious envy or a distorted sense of loyalty. Setting clear boundaries isn't cold, it's a necessary act of self-preservation to protect one's resources and emotional well-being from potential exploitation. Robert Quinn, my lead board member, leaned forward, his expression serious. Speaking from experience, Emily, you need to establish boundaries now. Once family members sense financial opportunity, the requests never stop. They escalate. A loan becomes an investment. An investment becomes a partnership. Before you know it, you're funding your cousin's essential oil business. The table laughed, but Robert's expression remained serious. I'm not joking. My brother-in-law pitched me a cryptocurrency scheme last month. We hadn't spoken in 5 years before I sold my last company. The dinner continued with war stories from successful entrepreneurs who'd navigated sudden wealth and the family complications that followed. Every person at the table had a variation of the same experience. The relatives who dismissed their ambitions suddenly became their biggest cheerleaders once success arrived. But even with these battle-hardened veterans of success by my side, I couldn't have predicted the next audacious move. The thing is, Eleanor said as dessert arrived, they're not entirely wrong to be skeptical initially. Most startups fail. The statistics are brutal. From their perspective, they were being realistic. But family isn't supposed to be realistic, I countered, the words coming from a deep, wounded place. They're supposed to be supportive, even when the odds are terrible. Ideally, yes. Reality is more complicated. She set down her fork, a sigh escaping her. Here's what I learned after my third exit: you can't punish people for being human, but you also don't owe them access to your life just because you share DNA. Finding the balance is the hard part. Her words stayed with me during the drive home. My brownstone felt cavernous and quiet. I'd bought it 6 months ago, but hadn't fully moved in. Most nights, I still slept at my old apartment, surrounded by the memories of struggle and determination. My phone buzzed, but I ignored it. Email had become overwhelming. My inbox contained 847 unread messages, many from people I'd known in various life phases. High school classmates who'd barely spoken to me wanted to reconnect. College acquaintances had exciting opportunities to discuss. Even my freshman year roommate, who'd once called my business idea cute, now wanted to grab coffee and pick my brain. One email stood out. The sender was Dr. Marcus Thorne, a professor from Stanford who tried to talk me out of leaving the MBA program. His message was brief: Emily. I was wrong. Your instincts were better than my experience. Congratulations on proving that. Sincerely, Raymond. I stared at those words for several minutes, a lump forming in my throat. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't asking for anything. He was simply acknowledging his mistake. I hit reply. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. My phone rang. An unknown Denver number. I almost didn't answer. Emily Monroe. A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Sarah Davis from the Denver Herald. We're running a feature on local tech success stories. I'd love to interview you about your journey, particularly the Stanford dropout angle. Our readers find that inspiring. I'll have my PR team reach out, I said automatically, already feeling the familiar dread of public narrative management. Actually, I was hoping to get some personal perspective. Family background, early struggles, that sort of thing. The human interest angle. She paused, then delivered the gut punch. I've already spoken with your mother. She had some wonderful stories about your childhood ambitions. Talked about how the family always knew you were destined for greatness. How she encouraged your interest in technology from a young age. Really touching stuff. My grip tightened on the phone, knuckles turning white. You spoke with my mother? Yes. She was very forthcoming. The rewriting of history had gone public. I'm going to stop you there, I said, my voice dangerously low. Anything my mother told you is her perspective, not objective fact. If you're writing about my journey, you need to understand that my family did not support my decision to leave Stanford. They actively discouraged it. For 3 years, they considered me a failure. Silence on the other end. Then that's not what your mother said. I'm sure it isn't. But if you print her version, I'll go on record contradicting it. Your choice which narrative you prefer, but one of them is actually true. Sarah's tone shifted, becoming more interested, a predator sensing blood. This sounds like there's a bigger story here. There's not. There's just the truth versus what people wish had happened. Use your judgment. I ended the call. What happened next would send shockwaves through our family, far beyond anything I could have intended. Within an hour, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. What were you thinking? Her voice was shrill with panic, laced with a venom I hadn't heard before. That reporter called me back. She's asking all sorts of questions now about family dynamics and whether we were supportive. You're making us look terrible. I'm not making you look like anything, I countered, my voice icy calm. I'm simply not letting you rewrite history for public consumption. This is humiliating, Emily. She asked if we really suggested you work at Walmart. Where would she get an idea like that from? Because it happened, I said, the memory still fresh. Still painful. Aunt Susan said it at Christmas dinner. You were sitting right there. That was taken out of context. She was just trying to help. No, I interrupted, my control finally slipping, a tremor of pure frustration in my voice. We're not doing this. You don't get to spin the narrative now that it's inconvenient. You spent 3 years treating my choices with contempt. Own it or don't, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen so you can look good in the newspaper. You're being vindictive, she wailed. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Dad took the phone, his voice calmer, but no less manipulative. Emily, you need to think about how this reflects on the family. Your mother has a reputation in this community. We have friends, colleagues, social standing. You're jeopardizing that. Then maybe you should have thought about that before calling me an embarrassment, I shot back, the anger finally breaking free. I never said that. That was Olivia. You didn't contradict her. 23 people heard her say it and not one person defended me. You sat there and studied your plate like it was the most fascinating thing you'd ever seen. His breathing grew heavy, audible even over the phone. What do you want from us, Emily? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We made mistakes. But this vindictive streak isn't like you. You don't know what's like me, I said quietly, the sting of his words a familiar ache. You never bothered to find out. I hung up before he could respond, my hands still shaking. The Denver Herald article ran a week later. Sarah Davis had done her homework. The piece detailed my journey accurately, including the family skepticism and the Christmas dinner confrontation. She'd even tracked down Uncle George, who'd uncomfortably confirmed that concern about my choices had been expressed. The article's headline read, From Family Disappointment to Forbes Billionaire, Emily Monroe's Unlikely Journey. It went viral. Within 24 hours, I was trending on Twitter. People shared their own stories of family members who doubted them. The narrative resonated deeply. Supportive messages flooded my company email. Other entrepreneurs reached out with solidarity. A surprising number of people had experienced similar dynamics, but the backlash against my family was harsh. Mom's social media accounts got bombarded with criticism. People called them unsupportive and short-sighted. Dad's accounting firm received negative reviews from people who had never been clients. Olivia's law firm LinkedIn page filled with comments about judging people prematurely. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, a cold pit forming in my stomach that resonated with years of suppressed hurt. A larger part, however, felt guilty. Daniel appeared in my office doorway Tuesday afternoon, his face etched with concern. Have you seen the response to the Herald article? Hard to miss. Your family is getting destroyed online. There's a change.org petition demanding your sister apologize publicly. It has 15,000 signatures. He sat down, a sigh escaping him. This is getting out of hand. I didn't start this. No, but you could end it. One statement asking people to leave your family alone would calm things down. I considered it. The vindictive part of me wanted to let them suffer the full consequences of their actions, wanted them to truly understand the pain they'd inflicted. But Daniel was right. This had escalated beyond reasonable accountability, beyond what I truly wished for. I drafted a statement and posted it on the company blog. While I appreciate the support I've received, I ask that people respect my family's privacy. Family dynamics are complicated. We all make mistakes. The focus should remain on the work we're doing to revolutionize healthcare analytics, not on personal matters. It helped somewhat. The harassment decreased, but didn't disappear entirely. Internet outrage has its own momentum, immune to reason or requests for moderation. Mom called that evening. Thank you for the statement. Things were getting frightening. People were showing up at the house. I'm sorry that happened. Are you? Her voice carried an edge, a sharp, accusing tone. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To humiliate us publicly. To punish us for not being perfect. I didn't want any of this, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I wanted you to believe in me 3 years ago. That's all I ever wanted. We're not mind readers, Emily. You shut us out completely. How are we supposed to support something we didn't understand? You could have asked questions instead of making assumptions, I retorted, the frustration a burning coal in my chest. You could have trusted that I knew what I was doing. You could have believed in me even when it didn't make sense. My voice cracked slightly, betraying the raw emotion beneath my calm facade. Instead, you spent 3 years looking at me like I was a cautionary tale. Because we were scared, Mom said, her voice finally breaking, the panic giving way to genuine vulnerability. We watched you throw away opportunities and refused to explain why. We saw you struggling financially and wouldn't let us help. What were we supposed to think? That I was capable. That I had a plan. That your daughter might actually know what she's doing. The conversation ended without resolution, as most of our recent conversations did. We were trapped in a loop of hurt and misunderstanding, each side convinced the other was being unreasonable. And as I held that check, a profound, almost shattering realization began to dawn on me. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing code when my assistant knocked. There's an Olivia Monroe here to see you. She says she's your sister. She doesn't have an appointment. She knows. She says it's important. I glanced at the clock. 3 p.m. She must have driven up from Pennsylvania. Send her in. Olivia entered wearing her power suit, the navy one she wore to important meetings. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled precisely. She looked like she was preparing for battle. Nice office, she said, glancing around at the minimalist decor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Charles River. My degrees hung on one wall next to patent certificates for my algorithms. Very impressive. Did you come here to compliment my interior design? I asked, my voice flat. She sat down without being invited, folding her hands neatly in her lap. We need to clear the air. What happened at Christmas? I feel terrible about it. I was stressed with work and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I leaned back in my chair, studying her, my heart a tight knot of skepticism. You said I was an embarrassment to the family. I was worried about you, she insisted, her voice gaining strength, trying to regain control of the narrative. We all were. You have to understand how it looked from our perspective. You dropped out of Stanford. You were living in that tiny apartment. You wouldn't tell us what you were working on. What were we supposed to think? You were supposed to trust me. How could we trust you when you wouldn't communicate? Her voice rose slightly, a hint of her old imperiousness returning. If you just explained what you were building, would you have believed me? I asked, echoing the question I'd asked Dad. If I told you I was developing revolutionary healthcare analytics software, would you have said, "Good for you, Em"? Or would you have suggested I get a job at Panera? She looked away, her face reddening. That's not fair. Isn't it? Be honest with yourself, Olivia. You made your judgment about my choices and my worth based on what you could see, which was nothing. The moment you found out I was successful, your entire attitude changed. Don't pretend this is about communication. Fine. She straightened her shoulders, regaining composure. You're right. I didn't take you seriously. Neither did Mom or Dad or anyone else. We were wrong. I'm apologizing. What more do you want? Nothing, I said honestly. I don't want anything from you. Don't be like that. We're sisters. She shifted in her chair, a subtle movement I recognized as a tell. This was the moment she'd been building toward. Actually, Ethan and I have been discussing some opportunities. He works with high-net-worth individuals on portfolio diversification. Given your recent windfall, we thought, no. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You haven't even heard the pitch. I don't need to. I have financial advisors. I have wealth managers. I have an entire team dedicated to making smart decisions with my company's money and my personal assets. What I don't have is family members who supported me when I had nothing. Olivia stood too, her face flushing. That's what this is about. You're punishing us for not believing in you. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply maintaining the same relationship we've always had. You didn't care about my life when I was broke. I don't need you in it now that I'm not. Her face flushed even deeper. Mom said you'd be difficult about this. She said success would go to your head. I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Of course she did. Tell me, when did she say that? Before or after she told everyone at her country club that she always knew I'd be successful? You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. I walked to the door and opened it. I have a 4 p.m. meeting. My assistant can validate your parking. She gathered her purse with sharp, angry movements. You know what? Maybe we were right about you. Maybe you are an embarrassment. Not because you're poor, but because success has turned you into someone bitter and petty. Maybe, I agreed, a weariness settling into my bones. Or maybe I just learned who people really are when the masks come off. She left without another word. I watched her stride through the office, past the rows of developers and analysts who'd believed in my vision when no one else did. These people had worked for equity and promises, had put in 18-hour days for a dream that everyone else called foolish. My assistant appeared in the doorway, a questioning look on her face. You okay? Yeah, I returned to my desk, the silence feeling heavier than before. I'm good. The rest of the week brought more of the same. Relatives I barely knew reached out with business proposals, investment opportunities, and requests for loans. Uncle George wanted me to fund his boat renovation. Cousin Chloe needed help with her daughter's college tuition. Aunt Susan's husband was starting a business and needed angel investors. Every single person who'd spent years watching me struggle now needed something. I declined them all politely, the polite refusals feeling like tiny cuts. Mom called Friday evening. We're planning a family dinner, a proper celebration of your success. Everyone wants to be there. I'm busy. Emily, please. Her voice cracked slightly. I know we hurt you. I know we didn't handle things well, but we're still your family. That has to count for something. Does it? I asked, the bitterness returning. Because for 3 years, being family meant watching you all look at me with pity and disappointment. It meant listening to suggestions that I give up and get a normal job. It meant being called an embarrassment at Christmas dinner while 20 people nodded in agreement. So, forgive me if I'm not eager to rush back into that dynamic. We were scared for you, Mom said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. We couldn't understand what you were doing or why you were so secretive about it. From our perspective, you'd thrown away a Stanford MBA to work on something you refused to explain. What were we supposed to think? You were supposed to believe in me anyway. My voice came out harder than I intended. That's what family does. They believe in you even when they don't understand. They support you even when it looks crazy. They don't wait until Forbes validates your choices to decide you were worth supporting all along. That's not fair. Life rarely is. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations and regrets. Finally, Mom spoke again. Your father's colleagues have been talking about how his daughter is this tech prodigy, but she won't take his calls. It's embarrassing for him. There was that word again, embarrassing. I'm sorry Dad's embarrassed, I said, truly, but that's his problem, not mine. When did you become so cold? She asked, her voice filled with bewildered hurt. Around the same time you all decided I was a failure. Funny how that works. I ended the call before she could respond. Saturday brought an unexpected email. Olivia had written a 5-paragraph essay about family values, forgiveness, and the importance of not letting money change relationships. The irony was apparently lost on her. I deleted it without responding. Sunday morning, I drove to my old apartment in Denver. I'd kept the lease even after buying the brownstone in Lehigh. Something about maintaining the space where it all started felt important, like a grounding anchor. The heat still didn't work properly. The refrigerator still made concerning noises. The view still showed nothing but other apartment buildings and a sliver of gray sky. I sat at the desk where I'd written the first lines of code 3 years ago. Where I'd cried out of frustration and exhaustion more times than I could count. Where I'd eaten ramen and questioned every decision while my family suggested retail jobs. My phone buzzed. Another text from cousin Chloe, hey, long time no talk. We should grab coffee soon and catch up. I turned off my phone, the silence a welcome balm. 3 months passed. The company continued growing, a relentless upward trajectory. We secured 2 major contracts worth $400 million in annual recurring revenue combined. I hired 200 more employees. Forbes did a follow-up article. TechCrunch called me one of the most influential people in healthcare technology. My family's attempts to contact me gradually decreased. Mom still called once a week, leaving voicemails I rarely returned. Dad sent occasional emails about firm business, always including a personal line at the end. Olivia stopped reaching out entirely. I didn't miss them. That was the part that surprised me most. I'd expected to feel guilty or sad or something other than this quiet relief. Instead, I felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of their expectations and disappointments. My real family had revealed itself over the past 3 years, Daniel, who'd left a 6-figure job at Google to be my CFO, Maya, who believed in the vision when it was still just PowerPoint slides, the developers who'd worked for equity when I couldn't afford salaries, the investors who'd taken a chance on a Stanford dropout with a crazy idea. These were the people who'd seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant knocked. Your mother is here. She's asking to see you. I glanced at my calendar. I don't have anything scheduled. She knows. She's asking for 5 minutes. I considered sending her away, a cold, clinical dismissal. Then, curiosity won. Okay. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. She'd lost weight and her hair had more gray. She sat across from me in the same chair Olivia had occupied months earlier, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice thin, fragile. I waited. I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm not here to pitch a business idea or request money. I'm here because you're my daughter and I miss you. A lump formed in my throat, unexpected. I've made mistakes. We all have. We judged you unfairly. We didn't support you when you needed us. We let our fear and misunderstanding turn into cruelty. I'm not asking you to forgive us. I'm just asking you to understand that we did those things out of love, even if it came out all wrong. Love, I repeated, the word tasting strange on my tongue. Is that what you call it? We were scared. We watched you throw away opportunities we would have done anything for. We couldn't understand why. And instead of asking, instead of trusting, we assumed the worst. That was wrong. I was wrong. She looked directly at me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not because you became successful, but because I didn't believe in you when you needed me to. I studied her face for signs of manipulation, for the angle, for whatever she really wanted. But she just looked tired and sad and genuinely regretful. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. But it doesn't change anything. I know. She stood up. I just needed you to hear it. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because you deserved to hear it 3 years ago. She walked to the door, then paused, her hand on the cold metal. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you built and how you built it. And I'm sorry I waited until everyone else told me to be proud before I figured it out myself. She left before I could respond. I sat at my desk for a long time after that, staring at the river, thinking about family and forgiveness and whether the two could ever truly coexist after fundamental trust had been broken. The following week brought a development I hadn't anticipated. I was reviewing partnership agreements when my assistant buzzed. There's a David Monroe here asking to see you. He says he's your father and that it's urgent. I hadn't expected Dad to make the trip from Pennsylvania. He stood when I entered the reception area, looking uncomfortable in his business suit. His hair had grayed since I'd last seen him. I had a client meeting in town, he said, avoiding my gaze, thought I'd stop by afterward. I led him to my office without comment. He took in the space with the analytical eye he'd honed over decades in accounting. His gaze lingered on the patent certificates, the awards, the photographs of the team at various company milestones. You've built something remarkable here. Thank you. I've been reading about your algorithms. The healthcare applications are genuinely innovative. He sat down, his posture rigid. I showed the technical papers to a colleague who specializes in medical practice accounting. He was impressed by the cost reduction projections. Dad settled into the chair across from my desk. I wish you'd explained it to us like that. In terms we could understand. I tried, I said, a flicker of old resentment. Multiple times. Remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago? I brought a presentation breaking down the market opportunity and the technical approach. Mom said it was too complicated and changed the subject to Olivia's vacation plans. He winced. I don't remember that. I do. I remember everything. Every dismissive comment, every suggestion that I was wasting my time, every look that said I was disappointing you. I kept my voice level, a steely control I'd perfected over years. You don't get to rewrite this, Dad. Not with me. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm trying to understand where we went so wrong that my daughter won't speak to me. His voice roughened, the carefully constructed composure cracking. Do you know what it's like to have colleagues congratulate me on your success while knowing you won't return my calls? To have people ask about you and realize I know less about your life than they learned from reading Forbes? Do you know what it was like to sit at Christmas dinner and hear my sister call me an embarrassment while my father said nothing? I countered, my voice rising slightly. To spend 3 years working myself to exhaustion while my family suggested I apply to grocery stores. I was trying to protect you from failure. You were trying to protect yourself from the embarrassment of having a daughter who failed. There's a difference. The words hung between us, sharp and unavoidable. Dad looked at his hands, the same hands that had taught me to ride a bike and later signed my Stanford acceptance letter with visible pride. You're probably right, he admitted finally, his voice barely a whisper. I built my firm from nothing. It took years of 80-hour weeks and sacrifice. When you wanted to do something similar, I should have recognized it. But all I could see was the risk, the statistical improbability of success, the likelihood that you'd waste years on something that wouldn't work out. And when it did work out, when Forbes published that article, I felt proud and ashamed in equal measure. Proud of what you'd accomplished. Ashamed that I hadn't believed you could do it. He met my gaze, his eyes full of a raw vulnerability I'd rarely seen. I'm here because I need you to know something. What we did to you was wrong. Not misguided or poorly expressed concern. It was wrong. We should have supported you regardless of whether we understood your choices. That's what parents do, and we failed. I hadn't expected such direct accountability. Most of my family's attempts at reconciliation had involved justifications and excuses. Dad was simply admitting fault. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully, a deep breath steadying me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. But I wanted you to have this. Inside was a check made out to my company for exactly $73,450. I looked up, confused. That's the amount you would have spent on your final year at Stanford, Dad explained, a precise accounting of my sacrifice. Tuition, room, and board, everything. I calculated it precisely. You gave up that education to build your company. He gestured to the check. I can't give you back the support you needed, but I can acknowledge the sacrifice you made. My throat tightened, a sudden unexpected surge of emotion making my eyes sting. The gesture was so quintessentially Dad, precise, calculated, expressed through numbers rather than emotions, but the thought behind it was undeniably genuine. I don't need your money, I managed, my voice hoarse. I know, but I need to give it. Consider it payment for the MBA education you gave yourself. You earned a more valuable degree than Stanford could have provided. He stood. I won't take more of your time. Dad. I stopped him at the door. Thank you for this, and for being honest. He nodded and left. I sat holding the check for a long time, understanding that some wounds might actually be capable of healing. The dynamic shifted after that conversation, not dramatically, but noticeably. Dad started sending occasional emails about accounting questions related to my business structure. I'd respond with answers, and we'd have brief professional exchanges that gradually incorporated personal elements. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, but it was something, a tentative bridge. Mom remained more complicated. She'd taken the public criticism hard and seemed unable to move past it. Our conversation stayed brief and surface level. She'd ask about work in general terms. I'd give vague updates, and we'd end the call with promises to talk soon that neither of us kept with any urgency. Olivia didn't reach out again. Through family channels, I heard she had been promoted to partner at her firm. Ethan had started his own wealth management company. Their lives continued on their predetermined path, and mine continued on the one I carved out. 6 months after the Forbes article, I received an invitation to speak at Stanford Business School. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in the same auditorium where I had attended classes years earlier. 200 MBA students filled the seats, notebooks open, expressions eager. Most of you will follow the traditional path I began. You'll graduate, join consulting firms or investment banks, work your way up established corporate ladders. There's nothing wrong with that. It's safe. It's respected. And it offers clear markers of success. I clicked to the next slide, showing my company's explosive growth trajectory. I didn't do that. I left this program with 1 semester remaining to build something everyone told me was impossible. My family thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe I was. Maybe I just got lucky. But here's what I learned: the people who love you aren't always capable of supporting the risks you need to take. The students were taking notes frantically. I wondered how many would actually deviate from their planned paths and how many would file this away as an interesting anecdote before accepting their JP Morgan offers. The hardest part wasn't the technical challenges or the fundraising or the 18-hour days. It was watching people I loved look at me with pity and disappointment. It was sitting at family dinners while relatives suggested I get a real job. It was knowing that the people who should have believed in me couldn't see past their own fear. A hand shot up. Young woman, front row, eager expression. How did you maintain confidence when everyone doubted you? I didn't always, I admitted, a raw honesty in my voice. Some nights I'd sit in my apartment wondering if they were right. If I was delusional, if I should just quit and take the consulting job my brother-in-law kept offering. But then I'd look at the code I'd written, the problem I was solving, and I'd know. Not think, not hope, no. I'd know. And I decided that my certainty mattered more than their doubt. Another hand. What about now? Did your family come around? Some did, some didn't. Some apologized genuinely. Some just wanted access to my success. I learned that family relationships are transactional more often than we'd like to admit. But I also learned that chosen family matters as much as biological family. The people who believed in me when I had nothing are the ones who matter now that I have something. The Q&A continued for another 45 minutes. Afterwards, several students approached with business cards and pitch decks. They all had the same hungry look I'd once seen in my own mirror. I took their information and made mental notes about which ones showed genuine promise versus which ones were chasing trends. Dr. Marcus Thorne found me in the hallway after, a thoughtful expression on his face. That was powerful and pointed. Was it too much? I asked, a slight tension in my shoulders. No, they needed to hear it. We seldom teach a vision of meritocracy and clear paths to success. We don't talk about the psychological toll of going against family expectations or social pressure. He smiled slightly. Though I suspect the administration will ask you to soften that message if you speak here again. Will there be a next time? Oh, definitely. You're exactly the kind of success story we want to claim, even if you didn't finish the program. His expression turned serious. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I tried to talk you out of leaving. I was looking at statistics and risk assessments. I should have been looking at you. You were doing your job. My job should have included recognizing exceptional talent and supporting it even when it made unconventional choices. He shook my hand, his grip firm. Thank you for proving me wrong. It doesn't happen often enough. The drive back to Boulder felt reflective. I thought about the students I just addressed, wondering how many would choose security over ambition. How many would let family pressure determine their paths? How many would have the courage to disappoint people temporarily in service of a long-term vision? My phone rang. Unknown Pennsylvania number. I almost didn't answer. Emily. A male voice, uncertain. It's Ethan. Olivia's husband. I pulled over, my heart giving a small jolt. This was unexpected. Ethan, what can I do for you? I owe you an apology, he spoke quickly, as though he'd rehearsed this, a nervous tremor in his voice. That Christmas dinner, the things Olivia said, the things I agreed with, we were wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. I've wanted to call for months, but couldn't figure out what to say. I listened, my finger hovering over the email icon on my phone, business still demanding attention. Business continued. Life continued. The hurt would probably always exist somewhere in the background, a scar that never quite faded. But scars were proof of survival, and I'd survived just fine. Better than fine, actually. That Christmas, I spent the holiday in Santorini with my executive team, my chosen family. We stayed at a resort overlooking the ocean, toasting to another successful year. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't seen in a year. Olivia sent a card. Mom sent a text, hope you're well. I responded to Mom, having a wonderful time. Hope you're well, too. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't cruelty either. It was simply the truth. I was having a wonderful time building something meaningful with people who believed in me from the beginning. And that, I decided, was enough. In the end, I had learned to value truth over comfort, authenticity over familial obligation. The journey had been isolating, painful, and ultimately transformative. It had cost me some relationships, but it had solidified others, revealing who truly stood by me. And I stand here now, looking back at the long road I've traveled, at the people I've loved and lost, and the ones I've found. Do you think it's possible for family, particularly a biological family, to truly reconcile and rebuild trust after such a profound, repeated betrayal of support and belief, or are some wounds simply too deep for unconditional healing?